Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So I think there's probably a few more people that'll be coming in from the hallway, but welcome everybody. Good morning. Glad everyone did make it out to this morning. My name is Gary Gruccio. I'm the Director of Enterprise and Market Analytics for Signet Jewelers. Signet goes by K Jewelers, Jared the Galleria of Jewelry, and Zales, and Piercing Pagoda are some of our famous brands. So I imagine that you've seen our commercials like at least once, right? Most of the people in the room, maybe once today, maybe once this morning. And with me is Ian Reed.
Sure. So Ian Reed, Manager of Enterprise Analytics at Signet. So today when we're going through this, we're going to be telling you our journey for our analytical path. We're talking about our organization, how we got started with analytics, but I also want you guys to keep in mind, think of it from your own personal progression. So with this, yes, we ramped up our organization, but with that, I've gone through 4 roles in 3 years, primarily because of the work that you guys are going to be seeing today.
And on the next slide, we have our agenda. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but we really just wanted to tell our story, the story of the Path to Brilliance initiative that we've implemented at Signet. Our Signet transformation plan is a 3-year plan for overall transformation of the company, and how we fit into that role, how we've sort of created a role for ourselves, and some of the cool things that we're doing, and really kind of have it be kind of a fun and interactive thing. We'll try to take questions at the end. We'll try to make sure that we leave some time for that. So what do we mean by Path to Brilliance? Path to Brilliance is a corporate turnaround plan for the next 3 years. It's actually 2 years into a 3-year plan of customer-first, omni-channel, and a culture of agility and efficiency. And so while that's the overall corporate objective, then you might have in your mind, like, well, how does analytics then fit all of this? And how does software fit all of this? So what we've attempted to do is fit nicely within this corporate plan how we've implemented Ultrix and Tableau, and to do customer analytics, to sort of unleash the talent of our team, to create an entrepreneurial mindset, to allow really more of a data-driven decision making and build a data culture. And what we're going to talk about really is not that it's all about implementing specific software platforms, but it's also about culture. Like, how do you transform people's mindset, their hearts and minds? How do you really get them to embrace this idea of change? You know, the way Alan was talking about, our computers are so much more powerful today than they were 30 years ago. So why use the same software that you were using 30 years ago to do your work today when you have potentially ways to do things differently? And we kind of have a unique story. We grew out of the real estate department. So we had done so many things with data efficiency and data visualization, data communications. People were always asking, why is this team able to produce answers in 2 to 3 hours where other business units take 2 to 3 weeks to produce the same kind of answers? And 1, we had access to our data, but 2, we had access to great tools. And then we sort of fostered this culture of growth and use of data and understanding of how to process data, how to automate a lot of the jobs that you were doing that were very manual, and actually produce a lot more time than to do data insight, data and analytics. So we report to, or well, there'll be a surprise ending, but initially here we reported to the Chief Transformation Officer through the SVP of Real Estate, and then our boss is the VP of Enterprise Analytics, Brian Strickland.
So this slide's really important because we grew out of the real estate department. So you hear a lot of implementations of analytical softwares coming from the top down, but I think this is to show you guys that it can grow organically within the department. And actually, I think that if it grows organically within a department that's not in IT, it speaks volumes. It shows that it's coming from the analyst for the analyst rather than being pushed on them. So just want to take a second to highlight that this is coming from real estate, which traditionally nobody would think that a software or a mindset of an analytical work would come from within that part of the organization.
So part of this discussion lands on like, why us? Well, we were very early to the game. I was an Ultrix user back in 2009, if you can believe it. A lot of people, are kind of new to the game. I've actually put a workflow that I've developed back in 2009 on the screen there. Obviously, Ultrix has changed a little bit since then. The tools don't quite look the same, and most people develop horizontally instead of vertically. But we've had a long experience with this whole idea of product efficiency or production and efficiency, and so that's one of the reasons why. Second, I pretty much grew my expertise in the software, and then was recognized by Ultrix as an Ultrix ace, so an expert in the software. I tend to think that that photo is a little bit unflattering, but the idea is that we tend to really have like this, legitimacy within the data community of actually demonstrating expertise and being recognized by Ultrix as people who are good at analytics. At the same time, we were earlier than all the people in our company at looking at visualization. So we started using Tableau in 2015. Many still haven't adopted it. And so again, we had the legitimacy of actually using the product for a period of 3 to 4 years before we were recognized by our business unit as being like best in class in terms of our ability to harness and process data. So there were basically these two reasons why we were selected as we were early to the game and we were very good at it. So I talked a little bit about like the idea of it's not just about implementing software and then just hoping that for the best, or implementing a data strategy and hoping for the best. A lot of this comes down to people, and this may be a typical model in most companies today. It was certainly the model that we were trying to break within our company. The idea is that IT and the business units are often at odds about data solutions. IT wants a lot of curated data sets. They want to maybe have one piece of software that everybody has use of, whether or not it's like ideal for everyone. And then the business units want to move faster. They want to be able to have like, they want to be nimble. They want to have their own type of software. They want to stand up their own data sets. And so what we had is in sort of IT and business at odds, where IT was saying, why did I buy this big platform and nobody's using it? And the business units were standing up their own data silos within their companies, like sort of or within their departments, sort of like shadow IT companies within the company, right? So you had like somebody who was maybe an expert at a specific piece of software, and then another department had their own software, and none of the data talked to each other. So we're attempting to break that mentality by creating like a third business unit that is facilitating the IT and the business relationship. And so was born the Enterprise Analytics team. There in red. So we are meant then to facilitate the relationship between traditional IT and the departments. And part of that, to satisfy that, is to build this data governance committee or data governance council to satisfy IT's need for data governance, and then to build an analytical community so people are bought into the idea, potentially I can give up some of the control that I have within my department, but be offered better tools and access to more company-wide data by participating in an enterprise data warehouse. And basically, so we're leveraging the use of Ultrix and Tableau to give them access to powerful tools and their data. In return, they're giving up some of their heritage and legacy databases and some of the control that they've had. So this data governance committee, what we do is we meet monthly, and we talk about data priorities, right? What data should belong in an enterprise data warehouse? What would be the first one that you would do if you had a chance to vote on 5 different ones? The idea is to potentially get with our data teams and our business unit experts or data stewards to leverage their expertise and get it all into one centralized data warehouse that's accessible to everyone in the company. And one of the ways we're managing this is using Ultrix Connect. We have a proof of concept in place where we've started to build these metadata catalogs. The idea is sort of like to create this corporate Wikipedia where people who are in the business units are facilitating the use of their data by defining their terms. What does sales mean to you if you're in marketing? How might that differ from somebody who's in operations? Maybe somebody doesn't include warranties and repairs in their data, those kinds of things. So the idea is to work with our IT and departments to sort of build this company metadata catalog to really facilitate the idea or the use or democratization of our data.
Yeah. So yeah, the Ultrix Connect, has anyone in this room actually heard of Ultrix Connect? Has anyone implemented it? I'm curious. One, okay. So the idea of this is, in our current environment or pre this transition, the only way you would get data is if you knew someone that knew somebody that knew somebody that had that data. So it's really word of mouth, and you could only go as far as that you knew people. So if you were new to the organization, I mean, you're limited to probably just a few Excel spreadsheets. So the point of Ultrix Connect, and I encourage you guys to look into that, is it's really a one-stop shop. People call it a data dictionary. I call it a data search engine. It's actually what it does is it takes all the data or metadata from all of our tables and automatically pulls it in, and it tells you what workflows it's hooked up to, what dashboards it's hooked up to, what reports it's coming from. So executives typically had an issue that you'd have one report here, and the numbers didn't tie, and they couldn't figure out why. So this was our way to combat that. So just all in all, Ultrix Connect is a great way for data democratization.
And then the whole idea of facilitating it out to the business units, we've tried to build an analytical community and get people together, not only quarterly, but also in specific trainings or workshops where they could potentially get exposed to the tools, get some training with the tools, potentially attend the ones that are of interest to them. This is a group that we had maybe about 50 or 60 people in a room just talking about how to build Tableau dashboards and how it might be a way that they can make it more efficient visualizations than they're currently doing in the tools that they have, and continue to sort of like build this idea of community so that it's not just that there's this marketing department that might have data that I'm asking for, but I might know to reach out to Mike because I met Mike at the meeting, and now I know Mike, and Mike and I collaborate on these kind of things, and when I need to ask him questions, I can give him a call. So we're trying to get them together where it's been typically more of a siloed or disparate approach. I'm appointed as the Ultrix expert within the company. Ian is appointed as the Tableau rep or expert within the company. And then we have ACE ambassadors, people who are tasked with sort of bringing the message to their department. Maybe they're within credit, and you want them to sort of have an influence on the rest of the credit departments. So you bring them in, let them know a little bit more about what's going on, and they potentially are the ones who are running with the tool and being able to show off to their bosses some of the efficiencies that they've made, and then sort of spread it virally within each of the departments that they represent. We promote quarterly meetings, as we talked about, getting everyone together. We're going to have one on St. Patrick's Day, so kind of make it a little bit social, but also get everyone together. Our Teams site is a very useful tool for us. We actually are operating as though it's an online community. People are asking a lot of questions and getting answers maybe from 3 or 4 people within like a half an hour, that kind of thing. We use it to promote social events. We use it to promote user groups within the market. So Cleveland User Group. We also have team members in Dallas. The idea is that we want to try to provide a forum for people to ask some questions. Here's a workflow I was working on. I don't understand where I got stuck. Can someone please assist me? And we do see that actually work. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different responses already in a very short period of time. One of the things that's maybe difficult about it is that it's not so easy to organize. So I can't say like, here's my most popular ones or the ones that have the most responses, but it is very useful for us because it does alleviate some of the phone calls that you might get or emails, and maybe it takes like 3 days for somebody to respond. You can actually get more instantaneous answers on the team site. We've worked on ideas for lab hours. Not always that well attended. We did have somebody suggest we should rebrand them as Ask a Nerd. I don't know, do you feel good about being a nerd? Yeah, so the idea is that we get people together at specific times, so it's not like, that we're not like on call all day, all hours, but specific times for people to get together. And then we do promote certification in the tool, especially Ultrix it's free, so there's really no cost other than the time invested in doing this, and we actually recognize people at our meetings who have been Ultrix certified. In terms of winning the hearts and minds, we talked about people. Coming down to people, we do have the IT department. There's a big group of people that you really need to win their heart and mind. We'll talk a little bit more about how that's gone. You do have the analytical community at large, and then you also have executive leadership who's going to be a sponsor, or somebody who's going to fund it. And the whole thought there is you may need to approach each of these groups differently.
So, believe it or not, my job was not just to stand in the back and look pretty. I actually do have some slides. So one of the things, I've been to a lot of different conferences, and I hear a lot about, hey, how did we get the tools? How did we get it approved? And then I hear a lot about, here's our COE. But a lot happens between getting the tools approved and that COE. So that's what I wanted to talk about right now. So when we did get our POC approved, we had virtually unlimited licenses for Ultrix and Tableau. So in my head, I love these tools. They're great. I thought I was going to have a figurative line outside my door of people asking for free licenses like, Oprah, you get a license, you get a license. But it didn't happen. We had probably 15 to 20 people that I knew would want licenses, but by and large, we didn't get that buy-in right away. So then I had to take a step back and think about it and say, well, I was an analyst. Why would I want to change what I'm doing? My current processes work. It's getting me by. Why would I want to change, learn a new tool, and really turn over 180 everything that I'm doing? So I had to think about it. So for an analyst, what are those big troubles? I was an analyst. What were my problems? Well, time. I would do the same reports week in, week out, monthly, quarterly, and then the quarter would go, and I'd do them all over again. And that wasn't rewarding, and I term that as glorified report builders. Our analysts were not analysts. So what we did is we showed them, hey, with these tools, you can automate your workflows. So now those weekly reporting, those monthly reporting, now those are automated, and it's not putting you out of a job. It's letting you refocus and learn new tools. So you can learn the predictive, you can learn the prescriptive tools. So it's repurposing you from a glorified report builder to an actual analyst. Another way I branded it to the analyst is saying you're investing in your career. So everyone wants more money, right? So in order to get these jobs like data scientists, you don't need to get a PhD. These tools are making it accessible. So if you learn Ultrix and learn how to use those predictive tools, they make it available to the everyday person. So what we're doing at our organization, and I think Alan talked about it for a minute, we have data scientists, but we also have citizen data scientists. So citizen data scientists actually sit inside the business units, and they may not be statisticians, they may not be PhDs and computer programmers, but they can get value. They can get value quickly with these tools. So we created a role internally for those citizen data scientists. From executive standpoint, I'm not an executive, but I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell a story. They're trying to make a compelling case to leadership to say, I need funding. We need to change the course of business. So what's the best way to do that? It's storytelling. So in my opinion, a poor way to do storytelling is what you see in Excel, which is crosstabs. Crosstab reports is what generally got distributed at organization all day long. And it's hard to make insights from those. So people are pre-wired to understand stories. So if you think about people all the way back to the Stone Ages, you told stories and it got people to listen up and they were compelling. So that's what we tried to do with data. So with Ultrix, you get speed to insight. Tableau helps you tell those stories. So now those executives that go into the meetings, when you have your counterpart that's coming in with Excel spreadsheets, you now come in with a Tableau dashboards. The executives listen up a little bit more and helps you tell that story. And to be honest, there's a cool factor to it. So the executives that are using this, their head's a little bit higher, their chest is out a little bit farther. So we use these really as a way to tell executives to buy in because it's gonna help you in the long run. Also, from an executive standpoint, I know these tools are expensive, but there are savings in them. So I tell them this is probably the most notable story that I had. There's a department that was third-partying all of their quarterly update decks to executives out to a third party. And that company was in Saudi Arabia, and they needed to make a last-minute change. And that company said no because they're sleeping at that time. So I sat with that analyst and I actually rebuilt that entire deck in 6 hours with them in Tableau and Ultrix. And she was literally crying by the end of it. So all those dollars that we had going to these third parties, we now redeployed and brought those in internally. So there's cost savings right there. From an IT perspective, that was probably the most challenging. IT in our organization was a little bit against these tools because they were going to start losing some control. So we had to paint the picture that it's actually doing the opposite. So with Tableau and with Ultrix Online, there's actually version control. They can see now who's creating these reports. It allows people to not only have version control, but see who's looking at them. So you can see who's running the analytical apps in Ultrix. You can see who's looking at the dashboards. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, a lot of the reports that people were generating that they thought were widely used at the organization, they weren't. So people that thought they had these really, really important jobs to create these reports found out that they're not that important. And they were able to redeploy that time that potentially took 20, 30% of their workforce now to actually developing what I call predictive and prescriptive models. So some of the roadblocks that we did run into, especially when standing up this POC is not gonna last forever. We're eventually gonna have to fund this, and how are we gonna do that? And you had this ROI. Everyone wants to know the ROI. I do not have a magical answer, and I have not heard one. So if you do have one, you should start a consulting firm. But what I tell people is track, and keep tracking. Eventually, you're gonna have a use case that proves out the ROI. In the case I just told you, that saved up of 6 figures. Someone was paying over $100,000 for these quarterly reports. Don't understand why, but there is $100,000 right there. Some other examples I think I can give to the room. You're gonna find them in areas that you least expect. So we had a maintenance dashboard. So whenever our stores, our jewelry stores, have a rip in the carpet, a broken showcase, you would say, yeah, I'm going to fix it, obviously. But that's not always the case. There's a lot of reasons you wouldn't. If you're closing the store, if you're remodeling the store, if you're moving the store. So we just created a simple dashboard that had checks and balances that said, if you're going to replace something in the store, check this list. Here's the date it's closing, remodeling. If it's not doing any of those things, go ahead and do it. An individual tracked what she would have done without it and with it, and she ended up saving over $150,000 in 1 quarter. So you're gonna find these savings in areas that you don't necessarily think. So I would say if you can get the POC from the beginning, tell people to start tracking their savings. Another roadblock that we ran into is people that say, I'm just doing just fine. I don't need to learn this. That's fine. Don't focus on them. Focus on the people that want to learn these tools. They're gonna be the catalyst for change. People are gonna see that their recognition, they're gonna be getting promoted, and they're gonna say, I'm being left out. So Gary talked to the Ultrix certification that we had. I think in the first 6 months, we had, 5 or 6 people get advanced certified. Those 5 or 6 people got promoted within a year. No surprise. So use that to your advantage and tell those stories. And last but not least, use leadership meetings to your advantage. Anytime you're showing a report or a dashboard or an insight, tell them where you got it from. Just keep getting them used to hearing Ultrix and Tableau or whatever that tool of choice is for you guys, and that'll go a long ways.
Okay, so I mentioned specifically IT business units and the executives. How did it go? So with the proof of concept, if I were to sum up this slide in one word, it would be conflict. Right? The idea was that we were coming in with something new, that was something sort of forced on the IT department. It was something that executive leadership wanted, but IT necessarily didn't have the capacity or the budget to do. And it's really a learning experience for us that we say, we probably shouldn't have done it that way, right? You know, again, working with people, emotions are involved, those kind of things. The idea is that we would want to probably build more of a relationship, maybe even find a champion within IT first before we would go forward. And things did change. So some of the conflicts that we had were over the idea of, what are the success criteria for this pilot? How do we know we're successful? The IT let us write those success criteria, and they didn't really review it. So when it came time to do the pilot evaluation, we had written it in a way that it was going to be very much in our favor. There was basically no argument that we had succeeded in our objectives, but there was really no partnership there. There was some significant conflict about who's going to fill out all the documentation. IT normally would do that for us. We ended up having to fill out all this documentation about architecture, server architecture, all these things we had no idea about, but we had to learn very quickly and put together these documents. So it was a butting heads a bit relationship, but that changed. We had a person join our company who was very open to this, who had done this at another company and was just definitely bought in. So that's was really, again, an eye-opener for us. The partnership really needs to be there, and if you have somebody who's a champion within IT, it very much helps if you're a business unit trying to stand something like this up. You may also have to realize that you're not the expert at everything, and maybe even your IT needs some expertise, that you can go out to third parties. There's a lot of third parties probably out in the hallway that are experts at helping you align different goals that you may not have expertise in. So nobody had set up an Ultrix Connect environment. We went out and hired somebody who has done that before and begins to teach our IT team how to do that, those kinds of things. So we've really now evolved more into a partnership role where we have these better relationship with them, and now things have been a lot more smooth for us.
The other thing I'll add too about the third parties, I hate to say call it playing the game, but a lot of times I could tell my executive something all day long, but I'm not a consultant, so they take it with a grain of salt. So sometimes bringing in these third parties just for your self-fulfillment purposes, have them tell the story, and a lot of times they'll buy into it. So I hate to say play the game, but it was a way that we were able to play the game.
So our lessons learned really were when the IT department, or when you do have obstacles, sometimes it's good to be persistent and jump through the hoops. You may need somebody who's within your IT department to be a champion for the cause, and maybe you need to shop around for that person before you would try to do something big like this. And then the thought is that you may not always be an expert. Go ahead and look for third-party help where it's necessary. For the analytical community, we talk about reaching hearts and minds. We actually use a lot of this internal marketing material. The idea initially is, hey, we're going to save you time. And the thought is eventually that they can put that time to more productive use. So 8-hour processes, you reduce to 2 minutes. Now what are you gonna do with your time? Analyze your data. Do the job you were actually hired to do. Don't worry about turning a report in just in time to give it to your boss without having to review it. Any time to review it because you might have mistakes. Actually have time to go through all the, so everything you would try to sell somebody on, why you would use this. The big deal was time, right? You're gonna save a lot of time and it's going to make you enjoy your job a lot better. We talk about the whole idea of disparate data sources. So you may want to be able to connect your data to census data, have some demographic analytics. You can't do that with the tools that you currently have. If we were to give you a tool like this, you can connect those data sets together. Maybe get some geospatial insight about your data. How does distance affect some of your models? Distance is just another variable in a statistical model, right? How do you integrate that within your analytics? So again, the idea of being compelling, people may have a lot of disparate data sources, but how do you connect them? And these tools will allow that. The idea of reducing errors. So anyone ever have a VLOOKUP error or something like that in Excel? I know I've actually stared them down and still haven't been able to decipher them. And, right? And sometimes it's maddening. So the idea of reducing your error level, and potentially, again, having a better experience with your data, being able to derive insights from it. The idea of staying relevant in your careers. I often ask a group that comes to a meeting, how many of you are data scientists? And most of the room kind of sits on their hands. They don't know, they're not a data scientist. And I say, how many of you want to be replaced by a data scientist? And then, of course, everybody sits on their hands. The idea of staying relevant in your career. These tools will lower the barrier to getting into some data science, or at least providing insight for your business that's not available from looking at data tables, but potentially getting people more into true analytics. We provide training. We've had people come on site to do data visualization training. Things, how do you build an efficient dashboard? How do you communicate visually if you're used to building nothing but charts or tables? Those kind of things. So we provide the training for people. We also have sort of a model where we'll sit down with people who are interested and build things with them. And that's one of the best ways to get up and started is sit down with someone's real business problem and engage with them one-on-one and try to help them build what they're trying to do. You have some who will say, I think I can do this on my own. And then there are some who say, I don't have any time for this. Can you guys build me something? But the thought is if we build something and help them deploy that they can run, they'll see the value in doing it themselves later and want to learn more. And finally, we sell the idea of this will make your life better. It's not just about your job. You're going to feel less frustration. You're going to be able to go home on time. You're going to be able to spend more time with your family. You're going to have a lot more fun at work. The idea is basically improving your life, by improving your work. So, does it work? Not always. You have a lot of people who are holdouts. What we tend to do is focus on the people who are receptive first, and then hopefully those people get recognition, and then others want to do the same things that they're doing. We've had some people who say, I know R and Python, why would I ever use a tool like Ultrix? So, if I know, I pretty much do everything I want in my data science tools, but what they've found is that there's been great efficiencies that they've been able to incorporate by using an Ultrix, maybe automating the data prep and still doing the model in R or Python, but a lot of the ugly work that you have to do first, they're using these tools to do, and then they're deploying the results in Tableau. So those people typically do come along at some point. And then you just have a lot, some people, maybe even some groups like finance who are saying, I'm comfortable with Excel. I only trust the Access database that I started in 2000, and I'm still using it today, right? And some of those people are harder to reach. And we're trying to figure out what the best way from a cultural standpoint is to reach those teams. But we have seen great efficiencies with the teams that have been receptive. And then finally, in terms of executive management, reaching their hearts and minds, and the middle managers as well. When it's the executive management, it's typically down to bottom line ROI. What are you going to do from a standpoint of saving money? What are you going to do from a standpoint of finding new business opportunities? And so we're always looking for ways to track that They may not be as, although they may say, they may not care that the report used to take 8 hours, now it takes 2 minutes. They care about bottom line ROI, how do I fund this and make sure I get a return? And so we look for opportunities for that. And for the middle management, it's a lot of breaking the idea of, we've always done it this way, I can't see any need to change my process, I know what I'm doing, and allowing their team to be free to explore other tools, give them time to learn these efficiencies. And in some ways, again, this is more of a challenge than selling it to the analysts, because the analysts get the idea of going home early, feeling good about their work and not being stressed. It may be a harder sell, and we are also looking at opportunities to bring people who are experts in change management on board, maybe data literacy, those kind of things that executives need to understand and know. Sometimes an executive may not understand what's even possible, so they're okay with what the team's producing today, not knowing that they can have either so much faster or so much better or so much more insight.
So the question at the end of the day then is, did it pay off? So this is specifically on Tableau, but Ultrix feeds Tableau, so we use it as one and the same. And you see a steady upward progression, so the answer is yes. However, what you also see in there, it's isolated a certain department. So in that bottom right, you see it's real estate, it's the K team, it's marketing, and that's about it. So we actually didn't have a choice when we rolled out our actual model post-POC. We did a chargeback model. So we bought the licenses for the organization. We had 105 Ultrix and 100 Tableau. But the departments were responsible for paying for those licenses. So what you found was you had two groups. One group would buy into it, but then they never used it. But they had the money because that department had the funds, which is marketing has a big budget, K has a big budget. And then you had another group of people that actually needed these tools, but their department doesn't have a budget for them. So that's why you see it's isolated in certain departments. That was the only way we could get it funded to start with. Right now, we eliminated that chargeback model. So now myself and Gary and the enterprise analytics team get to deploy these licenses. So we have a use it or lose it policy. If you don't open these tools in the past 30 days, then we're going to go ahead and redeploy that license to somebody else. So you're probably asking, how do you know who's using the tool and who's not? There's actually a code that you can embed in the Ultrix install package that sends, it's called phone home data, back to your server. So we actually see how many times people are running workflows, and we can actually see what tools they're using. So now we can say, okay, this person's just using for prep and blend. This person's using it for high-level predictive and prescriptive modeling. So now we can learn better where to approach our training. So for those that are interested in that, Google phone home data with Ultrix, and it'll show you how to do that. So real quick, I'm just going to run through this. Some strategies going forward for gaining and sustaining support. Gamification. Any way you can to gamify. We give people badges. We try to get people's name and pictures on screens around the organization for big wins, and that promotes people to start using these tools. Other areas I'll let you guys read through. I don't need to go through verbatim, but don't overlook, for those that have Tableau and Power BI, training for the end users. We did all of our training for how do you develop dashboards, but did no training on viewing. And I thought it was second nature to learn these, but it's not. You have executives that are not technologically advanced, so spend money, or spend time at least, in training the viewers as well. And last but not least, think differently. This is all about developing a culture. So I tell people, when you're bringing on tools like Ultrix and Tableau, you're not just bringing in a tool, you're bringing in a culture. One way that we were able to demonstrate that is our CEO. She actually said, I don't care how many stripes you have on your shoulder. I don't want the person that has the loudest voice in the room have an opinion. I want this to be coming from the ground up. I want our analysts to have a voice in the room. And she put that, or cemented that, by saying, I need you guys to develop a career path for analysts. Typically, the career path ended as analyst, senior analyst, and then it died. So now we're trying to create career paths to go to citizen data scientist, to data scientist, or you also have a management track that will do some mentoring, or even reverse mentoring, which is another. You have the analyst mentor the leader that may not have an analytical capability, so that leaders that are potentially scared of analytical work because it's just not their second nature, they can do that reverse mentoring, have that analyst mentor the leader. And last but not least, hire for success. So for those of you that are not involved in a local community or a local user group, I highly, highly encourage it, not just for your own networking benefit, but we've also found some amazing talent within the community at those events. I myself am not fond of networking. I think it's the nature of analysts that we are not quite vocal or outgoing. We like to keep to ourselves, but force yourself to do that. I promise you it'll pay dividends. You'll be amazed at the relationships that you build through that process.
So some of the tangible results, I mean, clearly we've seen efficiency across all departments that have implemented it. I'm not going to read every single one of these. I've been involved in the real estate optimization scenario where you potentially can take a look at your portfolio and see where it might be 5 years out if you created sort of a decision model on it. So it's like the kind of thing that used to take them 3 weeks behind closed doors, sitting down and going through locations one by one and saying, well, what might I do based on what I think, and we automated a lot of that, and it was really an efficiency driver. And then the predictive modeling, the time series, the one at the bottom, that's actually what Alan mentioned in his keynote, and it's pretty cool when you can do something and then have somebody from Ultrix at a community like this feature it in the Q&A session of his keynote. So some really cool things that we've been able to do so far, and it's just continuing to snowball. That we have a much bigger list than we would have had when we put this together initially.
So just want to run through, I think where I find a lot of benefit in looking at other people's work is, okay, so give me an example. And we are fortunate that we are able, our company gave us permission to showcase some of the dashboards that we built, although we did change some of the numbers inside of it. So this is one that, as Gary mentioned, that shows how our sales trending over time. Gary used Ultrix to do a time series analysis to help predict our sales. So now you can quickly see the time period. So if you're looking at those big spikes in the data, we're a jeweler. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas. So you can quickly see trends visually that you would not otherwise see inside of actual Excel workbooks. This is that maintenance dashboard that I mentioned earlier of do you put money into a store? Just gives you an overall sense of the health. So you can see anything that's red pops out immediately and says, hey, take a look at this. Those air conditioners in the bottom left tell you that they are approaching the useful life of the air conditioning unit, as well as are no longer under warranty. And then one thing that we like to do, and I don't see a lot of people take use of this, is in that top right where it says 3 tickets in the same trade area. Those are alerts that pop up. So as they look at the store, I have those dynamically appear that show here's certain flags that the executives want those maintenance personnel to be particular aware of. So I like putting flags on my dashboard that help highlight, I want you to draw attention to this. This is a dashboard over the overall health of our organization. So you can see each one of those blue boxes was actually a 20-page PDF. So we took probably 100 pages of PDFs that were going out on a weekly or monthly basis, combined it into a dashboard that people can quickly drill down and get other information on. So just from the sheer standpoint of executives having to thumb through 100 pages, now having a quick dashboard, there's a tremendous win in that. And last but not least, this was a travel budget. This is a funny story. I was working with the executive, and he wanted to see what departments are over on their travel budget. So I finally got done with it, and he goes, you know, I'm never going to look at this, right? And I go, why did you have me do this? I spent all this time, and I think it looks great. And he goes, well, have you heard of the Hawthorne principle? And I said, I have not. And he goes, if people know that they're being tracked, that alone changes their course of action. So I thought it was a pretty cool principle. I wish he would have told me that from the beginning. Probably wouldn't have spent as much time on it, but it was something that left an impression on my mind.
And really, some final key takeaways. This is really, it's a real story. I mean, we decided we would, tell our story, but, it's a data story, but it's very much a people story, a culture story. Know that if you're in a company where, you want to do something like this, you haven't really taken many steps, that you can make a difference. It may take longer than you think. Again, I started using Ultrix in 2009, started telling people about using it, and really didn't get a whole lot of traction for many, many years, but eventually we have now this corporate-wide initiative. Change can be difficult. It may be worth the difficulty, right? So be persistent. If you really want to make this happen, you might have to fight some battles, but it may be worth it. And again, looking for outside assistance. Sometimes you have to, again, realize that you're not the be-all, end-all expert. There may be people who you can rely on to contract with and potentially hire to do some of the work for you. And finally, I promised you the surprise ending. We spend a lot of time talking about the conflict that we have with IT. Well, now we're part of IT. So this was just formalized within the last 3 weeks. Our SVP of real estate was retiring, and they said, where does this business unit actually really align? And our chief information officer is now who we are under. So we view this as sort of acceptance or legitimacy within the C-suite of what we have done. That we're no longer sort of like a pet project within real estate, but we're actually within IT, and it should open a lot of access to us to get to things that we hadn't been able to accomplish before. And with that, we can go to Q&A. I think we have 5 minutes remaining. And I also want to put up the contact information, but here's the screen just to remind everybody there is a survey that you can take about our presentation.
Thanks, guys. I think it's a great story. I think you guys are kind of at the cutting edge of this. I'm kind of curious, as you started this, citizen data analyst journey, what did that mean from an IT infrastructure or from a performance standpoint? Were you finding as you were adding more users in that you had to then co-ramp up, or was that a concern?
So initially it wasn't as big of a concern because we were keeping a lot of the people using desktop versions of the software, and then we kept the server version for people who were really more apt to find some efficiency. So then, does the server have the capacity to handle the jobs and those kind of things? And so we kept it sort of exclusive to people who were saying, look, I've got this job that if I could automate it and run it 2 in the morning, I'd be much better off than coming in the morning and kicking it off and having it run till 10:30. Those kind of things. Now, there's still we're getting to that capacity and scale issue where now we have more of the people, and people are like hogging the server space, and whose job got in there first, and people finding ways like if I run it at 7:57, I might get it in before somebody that's running a big job at 8 o'clock, because people tend to think of like the normal times to start something, and they're finding ways to get around it. The Tableau piece of it, we've done a Tableau online deployment so far. And so they monitor the usage for us, they scale it for us, they do the upgrades to the server for us, and so that's been really one of the things that's helped facilitate this, is that Tableau has taken that end of it off of our hands. But on the Ultrix side, we're starting to get to that point where we may need to scale infrastructure, have more cores, more servers devoted to it. But initially we didn't reach that because we kept it exclusive to the people who showed the most promise and the most interest.
If you're having people use it, tell your executives, hey, this is what we wanted, this is what we planned for, and use that as a way to tell them like this was all expected. Sure.
Yeah, I was wondering, I think I can talk about on the software for the embedded usage. I thought that was Bill, that was kind of interesting. The software is taken away from some people. What do they do to get it back? When they say, okay, this is working out. Does that occur where they say, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't using it that much. Can I get it back?
Yeah. That's a good question. So we actually started, we just sent an email out to formalize it, so now that it's not getting pulled without telling them. But more often than not, when I pulled it, they never came back and asked for it again, so they must not have been using it. In the rare cases that they did, we just told them that, hey, we noticed that you weren't making effective use of the software, we redeployed it. But fortunately, up to this point, there's always been someone else that also hasn't been using it, so I took it from them and redeployed it. So again, if it gets to the point we need more licenses, great problem to have. That means we're moving up the analytical curve. Yeah. Sure. So we have a business review or business, what are they? BRG, business groups. I don't know. Business resource group. And so we're actually in the process of getting funding to make an official business resource group. So what comes with that is we have executive sponsor from a C-level executive as well as having a budget. But going with that, we have to have regularly scheduled meetings. In those meetings, we are highlighting wins like that, but we want to promote it to the whole entire organization. So a couple ways that we're doing that is we have TVs over the whole campus, and we're putting people's pictures up there, or that's the plan too, with what wins that they're accomplishing. Another way that we're doing it is we want to have what are called hackathons. So we're going to have a problem for the organization that people can solve with these tools during the course of the day. And you break up into groups, and it's a competition. And at the end of that, we're going to have an executive that's going to be the grader of it, decide who wins. So now they get exposure to executives, and executives get exposure to what's going on. So I think we are out of time, it looks like. But I want to say thank you. We'll be up here if you have questions, if you want to stop up.